The massive observation ship drifted silently through the dark void of space, its surface rippling like water in moonlight. Inside, Commander Gray of the Shades stood watching the main display, his naturally transparent form barely visible even to his own kind. Their race had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of invisibility, evolving beyond mere camouflage into true masters of light manipulation. "Status report," he ordered, his voice a soft whisper that carried across the bridge. The Shade never spoke loudly. They had no need to. Even their technology was designed to be completely silent, matching their natural abilities. "All systems nominal," Commander reported his second-in-command, Officer Swift. "Our light-bending field is operating at peak efficiency. We remain undetectable to all known forms of life." Gray nodded with satisfaction. The Shade had watched countless civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, always present but never seen. Their scientists had confirmed time and again that no species could detect their presence. They had observed primitive worlds develop basic tools, watched as civilizations discovered space travel, and documented countless wars and peace treaties, all while remaining perfectly hidden. "We're approaching Sector 7, Swift continued, gesturing to the star map. "Our scouts report 3 developing civilizations in this region. 2 have achieved basic spaceflight, while the 3rd is still working on their first satellite launch." The bridge crew went about their duties with practiced precision. Their ship, the Silent Watch, was the pride of the Shade fleet. Its hull was crafted from living crystal that could bend light around it just as their bodies did naturally. Even their engine cores were designed to contain all energy signatures. They were, as far as they knew, perfect observers. "Begin standard observation protocols," Gray commanded. "Record everything. Remember, we are the guardians of history, the unseen witnesses to the galaxy's evolution." The crew began their work, each member moving with deliberate care. Their civilization had built itself around one core principle: watch, record, but never interfere. They had seen the chaos that direct intervention could cause. Their oldest records told of times before they had perfected their invisibility, when other species had reacted with fear and violence to their presence. "Commander," called out the sensor operator, detecting unusual activity in Sector 7B. "A new species appears to have entered the region." Gray moved closer to the display, his transparent form shifting slightly as he focused on the readings. "Show me," he ordered. The main screen lit up with images of an unusual ship design they had never encountered before. It was bulky compared to their sleek vessels, with various protrusions and arrays extending from its hull. The ship's markings were clear and bold, no attempt at concealment at all. "How primitive," Officer Swift remarked. "They'd broadcast their presence so openly. They must be new to space travel." Gray watched as the unknown ship continued its journey through their observation sector. "Begin full documentation protocols. Let's see what we can learn about these newcomers." The bridge crew worked efficiently, gathering data on the strange vessel. They noted its power signatures, its movement patterns, and the regular bursts of communication it sent out into space. The Shade had seen thousands of species take their first steps into space, but something about this ship seemed different. "They appear to be calling themselves humans," the communications officer reported. "Their transmissions are surprisingly complex for a newly spacefaring species." Commander Gray felt a slight tremor of anticipation. This was why they existed, to document the rise of new civilizations. The humans would never know they were being watched, just like all the others before them. The Shade's perfect invisibility assured that. "Keep our distance," he ordered, "but maintain constant observation. I want to know everything about these humans. After all, they'll never know we're here." Little did Commander Gray know that this encounter would soon challenge everything his species believed about their place in the galaxy. The humans were about to turn the Shade's world upside down, and their perfect invisibility wasn't nearly as perfect as they thought. 3 days had passed since the human ship entered their sector. Commander Gray stood at his usual position on the Silent Watch's bridge, observing the peculiar vessel with growing curiosity. The humans seemed to be conducting some kind of survey mission, stopping at various points to launch small probe devices. "They're rather thorough," Officer Swift noted, watching the main display. "Most young species just rush through space as fast as they can." The human ship, which they had identified as the Starship Discovery from its transmissions, was now less than 50,000 kilometers from their position. Close enough for detailed observation, but still safely hidden behind their perfect camouflage. "Launch another sensor drone," Gray ordered. "Let's get a closer look at their—" "Commander," the sensor operator's voice crackled with unusual alarm. "The human ship, it's turning toward us." Gray felt his naturally transparent form ripple with confusion. "That's impossible. Check your readings." "Sir," the communications officer cut in. "They're broadcasting a message, and it's directed at us." The bridge fell silent. In thousands of years of observation, no species had ever detected them. The main speakers crackled to life with a calm, almost cheerful human voice. "Unknown vessel at coordinates 227 Mark 43. This is Captain Tom of the Starship Discovery. We've been watching you watch us for the past 3 days. Would you like to talk?" The Shade crew stared at each other in shock. Commander Gray's form flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme stress among his kind. "How?" Swift whispered. "Our light-bending technology is perfect. We're completely invisible." "Sir," the sensor operator called out, his voice shaking. "They're using multiple detection systems. I'm reading. Thermal imaging arrays, electromagnetic sensors, gravitational distortion detectors, and something called radar aimed directly at us." Gray watched in disbelief as detailed scans of their ship appeared on the human vessel's external displays, clearly visible through their long-range cameras. The humans weren't just detecting them. They were mapping every detail of the silent watch. "Another message coming in, sir," the communications officer reported. "Your cloaking technology is impressive." Captain Tom's voice came through again, sounding genuinely interested. "But you might want to work on masking your heat signature. You're lighting up our thermal cameras like a Christmas tree." Some younger crew members had to suppress what might have been laughter, a rare sound on a Shade vessel. Gray felt his authority slipping. "Sir, what do we do?" Swift asked. "We have no protocols for this. We've never actually talked to anyone." Gray stared at the human ship. Thousands of years of certainty were crumbling around him. The perfect observers had been observed. The invisible had been seen. "Commander," the tactical officer reported, "they're launching a small craft in our direction. No weapons signatures detected. It appears to be an invitation." The human captain's voice returned. "We're sending over a shuttle with some of our scientific team. They're really excited about your light-bending technology. Plus, we brought coffee and donuts. Ever tried them? They're pretty great." Gray looked around his bridge. His crew, trained for generations in the art of watching but never interacting, waited for his decision. In all their recorded history, no commander had ever faced such a situation. "Sir," Swift said quietly, "perhaps it's time we learned something new." After a long moment, Gray straightened his form, adopting what he hoped was a commanding posture. "Open a channel," he ordered. The communications officer, hands shaking slightly, activated their long-unused external communication system. "Starship Discovery," Gray spoke, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is Commander Gray of the Silent Watch. We accept your invitation." "Excellent," Captain Tom replied cheerfully. "Oh, and you might want to power down that sensor drone you launched earlier. Its energy signature is interfering with our coffee maker." As the human shuttle approached, Gray realized that his species' role as the galaxy's invisible observers had just come to an end. The humans hadn't just seen through their perfect camouflage. They had changed everything with a friendly hello and an offer of whatever donuts were. The age of hiding was over. The age of talking had begun. The meeting room aboard the Silent Watch buzzed with unusual activity. For the first time in its history, the ship designed for perfect stealth was hosting visitors. Commander Gray watched as the human scientists excitedly waved their scanning devices around, their eyes wide with wonder at the shade's transparent technology. "This is absolutely fascinating," Professor Mike said, adjusting his glasses as he studied a wall panel. "You've actually managed to create living crystal that bends light naturally. But haven't you ever tried to mask your other signatures?" Gray shifted uncomfortably. "Other signatures?" "Oh yes." Linda, the human thermal imaging expert, chimed in. She held up a small device that displayed a bright, glowing image of the room. "See, on our thermal cameras, you all shine like bright beacons. Your bodies give off quite a bit of heat." Officer Swift moved closer to the display, his transparent form rippling with curiosity. "But in all our years of observation, no species ever detected us." "Well," Professor Mike explained, munching on his third donut, "most species only develop visual detection first. But humans? We evolved as pursuit predators. We've always needed to track prey through multiple means: heat trails, scent, disturbed ground, broken twigs. When we moved into space, we naturally brought that same multi-sensor approach with us." The Shade crew gathered around as Linda pulled up more displays. "Look here," she pointed to different screens. "This is your electromagnetic signature. This one shows your gravitational footprint. And this is what you look like on standard radar." The images showed their supposedly invisible ship lighting up like a bright star on every scan except visual light. The Shade's perfect camouflage suddenly seemed far less perfect. "But how did you develop all these detection methods?" Gray asked, his pride somewhat wounded but his curiosity growing stronger. Captain Tom, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Necessity, mostly. Back on Earth, our military forces needed to detect stealth aircraft. Scientists developed radar. We needed to see in the dark. Thermal imaging was born. We needed to track submarines underwater. Sonar came along. Humans have always been good at finding things that don't want to be found." A young Shade engineer named Bolt, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. Could we learn these technologies?" "Of course." Linda beamed. "In fact, we'd love to work with you on developing true multi-spectrum camouflage. Your light-bending technology combined with our sensor masking techniques, we could create something revolutionary." Commander Gray watched as his crew began engaging with the humans, asking questions, sharing knowledge. The humans showed them handheld thermal cameras, explained the basics of radar, and demonstrated various scanning technologies. Each revelation seemed to both humble and excite the Shade. "You know," Captain Tom said quietly to Gray, "being invisible to eyes isn't enough anymore. The galaxy's getting smaller. Sooner or later, someone was going to spot you. Better it was you than someone hostile." Gray admitted, "Though I must ask, how did you know to approach us peacefully?" Tom laughed. "Well, any species advanced enough to develop perfect visual camouflage, but innocent enough to forget about thermal signatures. We figured you had to be either really peaceful or really focused on observation rather than combat." As if to prove his point, several Shade crew members were now taking turns looking through thermal cameras, amazed at seeing themselves clearly for the first time. Others were gathered around Professor Mike, who was explaining the principles of radar using a half-eaten donut as a prop. "Commander," Swift reported, excitement clear in his voice, "the humans are offering to help us upgrade our sensors. They say we've been missing about 60% of what's happening in space by relying only on visual observation." Gray looked around at his crew, seeing their enthusiasm for learning these new technologies. The humans had not just exposed their limitations, they had opened up whole new ways of seeing the universe. "Well," Gray said to Captain Tom, "it seems we have much to learn from each other. Though I must admit, these donuts of yours might be the most revolutionary discovery of all." The humans laughed, and for the first time in known history, the Shade joined in. Their perfect invisibility might have been broken, but something far more valuable was being built in its place. The grand chamber of the Shade High Council had never been so noisy. For millennia, the massive crystal hall had hosted only whispered discussions and silent observations. Today, it echoed with heated debates and confused arguments as the council tried to handle their first diplomatic crisis. "This is unacceptable," Elder Mist declared, his transparent form flickering rapidly with agitation. "We are observers, not participants. We cannot simply start talking to other species." "But they already know we're here," Council Member Beam countered, gesturing to the human delegation waiting patiently in the reception area. "We can't exactly go back to hiding." Commander Gray stood before the council, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. His decision to accept contact with the humans had sparked this unprecedented situation. "The humans have already shared their sensor technology with 3 other species," Gray reported. "Soon, everyone will be able to detect us. We must adapt or become truly vulnerable." The council chamber erupted in more arguments. Some members had completely lost control of their light-bending abilities, flickering in and out of visibility like broken holograms. Others had turned almost completely solid, a sign of severe stress among the Shade. "Order," High Elder Shadow commanded, his voice unusually loud for their species. "We must address this situation with clarity." "Commander Gray, bring in the human representatives." The massive crystal doors slid open, and Captain Tom entered alongside Ambassador Jack. The humans walked confidently, but their eyes were wide with wonder at the spectacular chamber. The walls sparkled with living crystal, and hundreds of semi-visible Shade Council members filled the tiered seats. "Wow," Jack whispered to Tom. "It's like being inside a giant diamond filled with ghosts." "Honored Council," Ambassador Jack spoke clearly, having been briefed on Shade protocols. "We come seeking friendship and mutual understanding. Humanity believes that diversity makes us all stronger." Elder Mist floated forward. "But you have destroyed our way of life. Our entire society is built on being unseen, unnoticed. What are we supposed to do now?" Jack smiled diplomatically. "With respect, Elder, being unseen doesn't mean being alone. Humanity has much to learn from your thousands of years of observation, and you might find that active participation in galactic affairs brings new opportunities." "Opportunities?" Council Member Beam asked, curiosity evident in his voice. "Indeed," Captain Tom joined in. "Your light-bending technology, combined with our sensor knowledge, could revolutionize space exploration. Your observational records could help prevent conflicts between species. You could be mediators, peacekeepers." The council chambers buzzed with surprised discussion. The concept of using their abilities to actively help others was completely foreign to them. But we have no experience in diplomacy," Elder Shadow admitted. "We don't even know how to begin." "That's okay," Jack replied warmly. "Nobody's born knowing diplomacy. We'll help you. In fact, we've brought some traditional Earth diplomatic aids to help break the ice." Tom opened a container, releasing the aroma of fresh-baked cookies into the chamber. Several council members inadvertently became fully visible in surprise. "Food sharing," Jack explained, "is a universal way to build friendship. Would anyone like to try one?" The younger council members moved forward first, their natural curiosity overcoming centuries of tradition. Soon, the strange sight of transparent beings carefully handling cookies filled the chamber. "These are quite good," Elder Shadow admitted, his dignity slightly compromised by cookie crumbs floating in his transparent form. "See," Tom smiled. "Diplomacy isn't so hard. It's just about finding common ground. And everyone loves cookies." Gradually, the tension in the chamber began to ease. Council members started asking questions about Earth customs, human technology, and galactic politics. The humans answered patiently, mixing humor with respect for the Shade's traditions. "Perhaps," Elder Shadow finally announced, "it is time for the Shade to emerge from the shadows, not to abandon our nature, but to use our unique abilities in new ways." Besides, Beam added, now on his third cookie, it's hard to remain completely isolated when everyone can see us anyway. The chamber filled with what might have been laughter, a sound so rare in Shade Society that some younger members weren't sure how to do it properly. Their first diplomatic meeting was chaotic, unconventional, and nothing like their careful observations of other species' politics. But maybe, Gray thought as he watched cookies disappearing into invisible mouths, that was exactly what they needed. The Joint Human Shade Research Center buzzed with activity, a stark contrast to the traditional silence of shade facilities. In one of the main laboratories, young engineer Bolt worked alongside human scientist Linda. Their latest experiment spread across the workbench. Try adjusting the thermal absorption layer, Linda suggested, eyes fixed on her sensors. We're still getting a heat signature leak around the edges. Bolt's transparent form shifted in concentration as he fine-tuned the crystal matrix. After 3 months of collaboration, the young shade had grown comfortable working with humans, even adopting some of their mannerisms. "There," he exclaimed, forgetting to whisper as most shades still did. "The heat signature is down by another 40%. Across the facility, similar scenes played out. Human engineers taught shade scientists about electromagnetic shielding while learning the secrets of living crystal technology. The combination of both species' knowledge was creating breakthroughs neither could have achieved alone. However, not everyone welcomed these changes. "This is absolute madness," Elder Mist declared, watching from the observation deck. He had come to inspect the facility, but couldn't hide his disapproval. "Look at them, talking loudly, moving quickly, behaving like humans." Commander Gray stood beside him, having become the unofficial bridge between traditional and progressive shade factions. "They're learning, Elder, and so are we." Yesterday, the team achieved complete invisibility across 7 different detection spectrums. But at what cost? Mist gestured to a group of young shade eating lunch with their human colleagues. "They're abandoning our ways. Some aren't even maintaining proper light-bending discipline anymore." It was true. Many younger shade had started experimenting with partial visibility, finding it more practical for working with tools and equipment. Some even displayed color patterns, a practice long considered frivolous by traditional shade society. "Watch this," Linda called out excitedly from the lab below. She activated their latest prototype, a small drone that disappeared completely from both visual light and thermal imaging. "Impressive," Elder Mist admitted reluctantly. But an alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Another human innovation that made Elder Mist wince. Captain Tom's voice came over the announcement system. "All personnel to the main hall. The council has called an emergency session." In the main hall, hundreds of shade and humans gathered. High Elder Shadow's image appeared on the large display screen, yet another adaptation to working with humans who couldn't see subtle shade gestures. "We have received disturbing news," Shadow announced. "The Ravagers have attacked another border world. Their ships are completely invisible to conventional sensors." Murmurs filled the hall. The Ravagers were a mysterious species that had been raiding outlying colonies, somehow avoiding all detection systems. "They must have stolen some of our technology," Elder Mist said, his form rippling with anger. "No," Linda spoke up, checking her tablet. "The sensor readings are different. They're using a form of quantum field manipulation. It's cruder than your crystal technology, but effective enough for sneak attacks." Bolt suddenly straightened up. "Linda, remember that multi-spectrum detection system we were working on last week? The one that could track quantum disturbances?" Linda's eyes widened. "Yes, if we combine that with the Shade's crystal sensors, we could track the Ravager ships," they finished together. Commander Gray watched as humans and Shade immediately began forming working groups, sharing ideas, and setting up equipment. Even Elder Mist seemed impressed by their efficiency. "This," Gray said quietly, "is why we needed to change. Alone, we were vulnerable. Together, we're stronger." "The young ones," Mist admitted, watching Bolt coordinate between 3 different research teams. "They adapt so easily." "They're not just adapting," Gray replied. "They're evolving. Just as our ancestors developed light-bending abilities, this generation is developing new strengths: teamwork, innovation, the ability to combine our wisdom with human ingenuity." Below them, Linda and Bolt had already produced preliminary designs for a new detection grid. Other teams were adapting shade crystals to human sensor arrays, creating hybrid technology that neither species could have imagined 3 months ago. "Perhaps," Elder Mist said slowly, "it is we elders who need to adapt the most." The facility hummed with energy as two very different species worked together, proving that sometimes the best way to preserve tradition was to allow it to grow into something new. The Silent Watch's bridge was no longer silent. Red alert warnings flashed across screens as both human and shade crew members worked at their stations. Commander Gray stood at the center, watching the tactical display with growing concern. "Another colony gone dark," Officer Swift reported, his transparent form tight with tension. The Ravagers hit them before their detection grid was fully online. "How many people?" Gray asked, dreading the answer. 5,000 colonists. The evacuation only saved half of them." Swift's voice carried the weight of guilt. We used to watch this sector. If we had warned them earlier." The words hung heavy in the air. For centuries, the Shade had observed similar attacks without interfering, following their sacred principle of non-intervention. But now, knowing they could have helped, the cost of their inaction became unbearably real. Multiple quantum distortion signatures detected. Linda called from her sensor station. 3 Ravager ships just dropped out of stealth mode. They're heading toward the Thompson colony. "Thompson has 15,000 civilians," Captain Tom added from his advisory position. "Their defense systems aren't ready for this kind of attack." Gray felt the eyes of both his Shade crew and their human partners upon him. In the past months, the Silent Watch had been retrofitted with hybrid technology, combining Shade crystals with human sensors. They were possibly the only ship that could stop this attack. But intervention went against everything the Shade had believed for thousands of years. His communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission from the High Council. Elder Shadow's image appeared, along with Elder Mist and other council members. "Commander," Shadow spoke gravely, "we have observed long enough. We cannot watch another massacre." Elder Mist, who had once been the strongest voice for tradition, nodded. "These Ravagers corrupt the very principle of invisibility. They use it not to observe, but to destroy." "The Council," Shadow continued, "authorizes direct intervention. Save those colonists, Commander." Gray straightened, his transparent form becoming slightly more solid, a sign of absolute determination among the Shade. "Helm, set course for Thompson Colony, maximum speed. Linda, keep those sensors locked on the Ravager signatures. Swift, power up the new weapon systems." The Silent Watch leaped into action, its enhanced engines pushing it faster than any Shade ship had ever flown before. On the tactical display, the Ravager ships appeared as ghostly shadows, their quantum stealth technology making them almost invisible to normal sensors. "They're starting their attack run," Linda reported. 5 minutes until they're in weapons range of the colony." "They still don't know we can see them," Bolt added from his engineering station. "Our new sensors are tracking them perfectly, but their scanners can't detect us through our combined stealth field." Gray allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. The Ravagers thought they were invisible hunters, just as the Shade once had. They were about to learn the same harsh lesson. 3 minutes to intercept, the helm officer announced. "Weapons locked on their engine signatures," Swift reported. "The crystal-focused beam arrays are ready." 2 minutes. Gray watched the tactical display, timing their approach perfectly. "All hands, prepare for combat. For the first time in our history, the Silent Watch will live up to its name. We are not here to just watch anymore." The Ravager ships came into view on the main screen, their dark hulls barely visible even to enhanced sensors. They were completely focused on their target, unaware of the Guardian approaching from their blind spot. 30 seconds. "Remember your training," Gray commanded. "Humans and Shade together. We are stronger than they could imagine." 10 seconds. Gray took a deep breath. "Swift, target their propulsion systems. Let's show them what happens when Watchers become warriors." The Silent Watch dropped out of stealth mode directly behind the Ravager squadron. Before the Raiders could react, precisely targeted beams of energy, focused through living crystals and guided by human targeting systems, lashed out across space. The battle to save Thompson Colony was about to begin, and with it, a new chapter in Shade history. They were no longer mere observers of the galaxy's story. They were finally becoming part of it. The time for watching had ended. The time for action had come. 1 year after the Battle of Thompson Colony, the Grand Observation Hall of the Shade homeworld hosted a ceremony unlike any in their history. The massive crystal chamber, once used only for silent watching, now buzzed with voices speaking dozens of languages. Representatives from 20 different species had gathered to celebrate the formation of the new Galactic Protection Force. Commander Gray, now Admiral Gray, stood on the central platform alongside human and Shade officials. The Silent Watch, newly rebuilt and upgraded, hung visible in orbit above them, its crystal hull gleaming in the starlight, a symbol of how far they had come. A year ago, Gray addressed the gathered crowd. "We learned that true strength isn't found in hiding, but in standing together. The Battle of Thompson Colony taught us that." The massive screens behind him displayed footage from that historic battle. The Silent Watch's first attack had disabled 2 Ravager ships immediately. The third had tried to flee, only to run straight into a waiting human battle group. That day had marked the beginning of the end for the Ravager threat. "The Ravagers thought themselves invisible hunters," Gray continued, "just as we once did. But they, like us, learned that no one can hide forever. The question is what you do when you're finally seen." Lyndon, now the chief of Human Shade Technology Integration, stepped forward to activate a holographic display. It showed the new defense network that now protected colonial space, a combination of Shade crystal technology and human sensing systems. "Our latest stealth detection grids can track any ship in protected space," she explained. "But more importantly, we've learned to use invisibility not to hide, but to protect." Bolt, wearing the new uniform of the Joint Force, demonstrated by activating a nearby crystal panel. The entire chamber briefly vanished from view, then reappeared. "We can now extend our light-bending fields around entire colonies," he announced proudly. "Combined with human sensor jamming technology, we can hide those who need protection, not just ourselves." Captain Tom, his uniform now bearing both human and Shade insignia, stepped up next to Gray. "The Ravagers' final attack was 3 months ago. They never knew what hit them. Hard to be a predator when your prey can turn invisible and your stealth doesn't work anymore." Laughter rippled through the crowd, a sound that no longer seemed strange in Shade halls. Even Elder Mist, watching from his council seat, allowed himself a visible smile. "But our greatest achievement," Gray continued, "isn't the technology we've created or the battles we've won. It's the change we've undergone as a people." He gestured to the young Shade officers working alongside humans and other species throughout the chamber. Some maintained traditional full invisibility, others displayed partial visibility, and some even showed creative color patterns, all accepted ways of being Shade now. "We were once consumed by the need to remain unseen," Gray said. "We watched countless tragedies, telling ourselves that observation was enough. But our human friends taught us that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from joining the story, not just watching it." The chamber's crystal walls pulsed with soft light, a traditional Shade expression of strong emotion. Human scientists had recently discovered that these pulses actually transmitted complex encrypted data, suggesting the Shade had been communicating through light itself all along. "Today," Gray announced, "we launched the first joint patrol fleets, Shade stealth technology and human ingenuity, working together to protect all worlds from those who would abuse the power of invisibility." The crowds cheered as the first ships took off. sleek crystal vessels with human sensor arrays, crewed by both species. Above them, the Silent Watch's crystal hull transformed from invisible to a proud display of iridescent colors, a final symbol of how far the Shade had come. Elder Shadow rose from his council seat, his form fully visible, something unthinkable a year ago. We once believed ourselves the perfect hunters because we could not be seen. Now we understand that true perfection lies not in hiding from the galaxy, but in helping to protect it. As the celebration continued, Gray watched humans and Shade mingling freely, sharing stories and plans for the future. They had evolved from hidden observers to active guardians, from solitary hunters to united protectors. The age of invisible watchers was over. The age of visible allies had begun.